First, just an administrative check on the agenda. Is there any topics we think we're not going to get to tonight, just so nobody sticks around? As a normally, hold the 10 o'clock, right? So, definitely get to community liaisons, FFB. Do we want to wait on seclusion rooms?
We can.
Or do we want to see where we get?
Excuse me?
Doing an administrative check on the agenda here. Is there any topics you think we're not going to get to? Because we're going to stop at 10, because we always do.
Okay.
Or we'll just run through the agenda and see where we get.
Sure.
All right, let's do it. So the first item on the agenda is community liaisons. And so, Steve, I think there was a couple of, I want to frame this, right? Okay, so framing it, trying to get us moving on the conversation. So
All
I
right.
think there was a couple opportunities, what's transpired today, right? Some of our level to level, district to city, communications probably, we were perhaps working at the wrong level. Second thing is perhaps we were a little too casual or informal in some of the conversations, so we'll want to talk about that. I would see potentially for discussion, potentially 3 next steps. One is, I think we want to reinvite business as usual with the Iowa City Police Department in terms of what they do, in terms of, you know, routine patrols and dropping by schools.
Yeah.
And, so one would be reinvite business as usual. That'd probably be from you, Steve, to Jeff. Huh?
No, people said dare. I'm like, do we even have dare?
No, we don't.
Okay, thank you.
The second thing would be for, you know, defining, you know, if we're doing things in the classroom directly with our student and student engagements, that, you know, we should always have a program/curriculum. That should be true whether it's the visiting authors or whatever. And then we need to provide, you know, notice to parents and stuff, you know, the curriculum that's going on like that when we have visitors coming to school, so. Reinvite back to normal with ICPD.
So can I touch on that one? I've got.
It's up to you, and then
Yep.
notice to parents. Thoughts?
I'll just start with the first one. So I had the opportunity, I sat down with Jeff Froon and a couple of senior members of the Iowa City Police Department. It was a great meeting. We have a great relationship with them, but I'll tell you that they were very direct with us and said that they are waiting for an invitation from the board prior to re-entering the schools in that business as usual model. So that's the message from them. Very affirmative that if there were issues that arose in the normal course of business that required police presence, that they were definitely ready to respond. But we discussed everything from weekend drive-throughs of the property to the sector cars and their informal visits to the schools. And again, they were emphatic that those were not taking place while they were awaiting a more formal invitation to come back into the district from the board.
So you don't need board action on that though, right? You can
Nope.
do it.
Just essentially a public invitation from the board to come back into the schools.
So I would make a motion that the board.
We don't make a motion. There's no motion. Is there any alignment? Is there any misalignment? Is anybody not aligned to what Steve just said, the invitation?
I think it would be really great with the work that they are doing, whether it's this particular program and or these informal drop-throughs. At some point during the school year or sometime during the year, that we get a small report from them saying, this is the service that we're providing for you, because I don't think people know that, and I think that would be very helpful for people to know what the police are doing to support staff and students in our community already. And so as well as with this program, you know, it'd be really great if we get a little report about how the relationships were fostered, etc. I think that would be, I'm assuming that this is coming in as some type of pilot program and has the potential to be expanded, or, I mean, it would be interesting to know more about it.
So when I talk to the city, are you looking for, you're not looking for a report on those informal interactions, the
I mean,
parking lot drive-throughs?
If they just are popping through and it's an informal, I mean, I
Right.
think it would be good to know they have these informal things that are happening.
So more of a summary of those?
A summary. It would be great to be like, well, we help talk about Alice trainings, or, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I mean, I just think that that's helpful for transparency purposes to know. It helps the public also know. Whenever fostering relationships, I think that's helpful for
And I
them to know.
think it's important that we show that we're open. And I talked with Jeff Froen too today on the phone, and I think he, you know, we students need to apologize to the city for our actions. And there were some hurt feelings too for the officer involved, who I went to his induction into the African American Hall of Fame. And if you want to look at his classmates that he's inducted with, it's from George Washington Carver to Simon Estes to Philip Hubbard and many others. And they need to know too, when in my discussion with Jeff, is he needs to know if it's a type of a thing, if it's with a building administrator or if it's with the ESC. Because if a building administrator wants to do a program, and to say what was done as a program is really kind of a stretch. It was lunch with, I think, 8 kids that knew the officer, knew the individual, and it was okay with the principal, and they went in and did it. And the next, it happened 2 times, and the next time it went from 8 kids down to 6. It wasn't all at-risk kids, it was all kinds of kids, white kids, Hispanic kids, black kids. You know, I think it was a phenomenal effort, and it wasn't paid for out of our general fund. It was being funded by the city, and the city, you know, I compliment the city for what they're doing. And, you know, I see this in the Gazette about Tim Dwight's deal at Twain, and it says kindergarten through 6th graders. You know, did he have to submit anything about his program? I mean, what was the standard for him? Is it applied to everybody else? Our firefighters come into our schools too in uniform, EMTs, those type of community servants. And I think it's important that we send a loud and clear message that they're all welcome on our campuses. But I'm concerned too that, you know, whatever we apply is applied evenly around the way. And I know there was a banker that did a program at Alexander. I don't know that he was asked to get a memorandum of understanding or anything like that.
What's the standard? I mean, like, what is it?
If they're doing educational programming, then we look for a formalization of that process. If they're doing a guest speaking engagement, if you will, I think about like the work we're doing with our maker spaces and the visiting makers that come in. They're part of that process, and so they've been given the framework within which we're looking for the presentation for that. For the Twain one, that was part of a student assembly, and so when they go out and seek out speakers for that, they have the content that they're looking for in terms of that presentation for that particular speaker to come in and the thematic content that they want them to discuss. So that's a fairly straightforward process for all those types of visits.
So, like, what's the difference between the community resource, I won't say officer because that word is being incorrectly used a little bit, I think. I mean, I get the point of it, obviously from the community standpoint, I get the point of it, but I guess I was just trying to understand, is it a program, is it not a program? Is it just a one-time thing? I guess that was some of the questions, is what is it? Was it an ongoing thing? I think that's different between a guest speaker and this is something that's ongoing with multiple schools. I mean, can someone give me a frame a little bit about it?
And part of this conversation is important because there's some programs that are on hold right now. Like, for example, I have a reading program that's really interesting for Alexander that I want to kind of get some clear board guidance in this sense as well. And so, I do want to be clear, from the onset, I think Director Hemingway is correct. It don't happen with, you said 8 kids. It happened in one of our elementary schools. And to Director Hemingway's comments, normally some of these programs will happen at the building level because, principals have interactions with multiple groups. I mean, I can bring up our football team. There's tons of groups that our principals have interactions with. The only time it came to my attention was from the community service liaison and principals because, it wasn't happening in all the schools or all the schools, the elementaries that the particular leader of the program wanted to get in, be a part of. I know that it's been written that I was supportive, but the emails don't necessarily speak to that. I was the one that sent out the email saying that it should be in the rest of the 5 schools, and principals, can we move this forward? And so, I mean, Director Herman was right, it is a principal decision, but I felt like it was an important program, and so I sent emails to ask them to, incorporate the program in their schools as well. And I think some of it, just to be clear, principals are busy. I don't think that principals were necessarily against the program. I think that, it was just me kind of, hey, this is an important program, something that I think would, be helpful for schools. Can you get this going? And I think I sent another reminder email as well. Then after that, I guess, from, my standpoint, as we pulled from the search information, there were approximately about 177 emails that came between me and the rest of the school about questions about the program. And so I felt like it was appropriate to make sure we had a clear understanding moving forward. I think it's made mention that I sent it to the individual's personal account. I think the reason why I did that was because I thought this was a personal situation. I didn't think that this needed to be, even the conversations or some of the emails that were shared, I didn't think necessarily they needed to be public. I think it was, hey, there just seems to be some questions I think if you come with a clear understanding. As Director Newman says, if it's just lunch, just, make it clear to folks from that standpoint. I think that from that standpoint, took it upon myself to add additional things that I had, not necessarily heard in this context, but from a community standpoint. And so that has nothing to do with, anybody involved. I just was thinking about multiple concerns that I've heard, and so I wanted to incorporate it in that MOU or interagency agreement. Am I saying that was the best way of handling the situation? No. Is it problematic that I have a legal background sometimes? Yes, and I immediately think of, agreements that clearly identify and outline, what we're going to do, what someone's going to do, and what someone else is going to do. And so, now that it's become somewhat of a big deal, I kind of, wish I wouldn't have said that, because it caused more confusion about my actual intention behind the program than I really wanted to happen. And so, from that perspective, again, kind of to your question, Director Deloche, I was told that it was a lunch program, just having lunch with kids, and so from that standpoint, that's why I moved forward and said, please do it. I did receive communication from the principals that it was a little bit more than that. There was questions about, doing some awards, possibly taking kids to field trips and other things, and because of that, I think the principals were coming back to me, well, Kingsley, for support of this program, why didn't you tell me there was other things associated with it? And so that's where I felt like it was upon myself to provide some type of framework. But again, if the board wants me to handle this in a different way, and maybe not handle it in a different way, I'm up to listening to any type of guidance that you can provide.
I think the question is, what is it in just in one school?
No, it's in approximately five. So it's approximately 5 schools. I can say the schools. It was first in Lemmy, and so it's first in Lemmy, and that was prior to my knowledge. And then it was going to be in Lucas, Grantwood, Alexander, and Twain. So that's not 6, it's 5. And so at that time, it was just tough for the individual, the leader of the program, to just get a hold of the principals and get some of that started. And so that's when I took it upon myself to try to get it started and get the program going.
So what's your recommendation, Steve?
That we formally re-engage with Iowa City PD. We send them that formal invitation to do that. That includes their sector officers having the opportunity to stop in informally in our schools. One of the things that provides value to us for is as part of our ALICE training, we have them walk the school so that they understand the floor plan and the footprint of the building in case they need to come in during an emergency situation. So as their sector officers rotate throughout the community, we want them in there.
So we're going to re-invite the ICPD, check.
What's that?
We're going to re-invite them.
Yep.
Check mark.
I just want to make sure you knew what we were talking about, those informal things, evening, weekend property drive-throughs, and then re-engage with them in conversation about interactions that they have with kids, and I think that there's probably value. Jeff and the PD leadership actually expressed interest in ensuring that it's formalized to some degree, at least in the sense that it's written down. People understand what the scope is. They said it would help their officers in terms of working with the schools. We think it would help the schools in working with them. So I think there was a mutual agreement or mutual understanding that would provide benefit for both groups, especially moving forward. So when we look, whether it's field trips or lunches or whatever they are, that there's at least some scope laid out so we know what it looks like. I think one of the other issues that came up was, do we notify parents when kids are participating in these kinds of things? I think there's value in that, simply in the fact that we do that with whether Tim Dwight's coming in, we send notification home to parents that we're having a pep rally for the kids, whether the football team is coming in to read with the kids at lunch, we send a notification home for parents, so it's just another opportunity for us to reinforce who's coming
So
in.
you're saying, Steve, we did send out a notification to parents about this event?
Yeah, that we advertise those pep rallies, we advertise who the speakers are to the parents. I think this is an opportunity, for instance, if you're going to run a program like this at the school, our school newsletter is a great place to share that so that parents know that that opportunity is out there. Because sometimes parents might reach out and say, I would like my child to participate in whatever this is. So that gives them the opportunity to understand what's out there and proactively reach out to us and if that's something that they want their kids to
Well, the
be a part of.
documentation, you already said this, right? If it's curriculum or programming, there's formalized documentation. Doesn't mean there's a MOU but there would at least be a one-pager that like described what it is, right?
It might even be email going back and forth saying, we're going to do this. Yep, you're going to do this.
But you should be able to produce like a one-pager on, here's the program, if somebody asked. I mean, because if we asked on visiting authors,
Yeah.
or maker spaces, or you could.
At
you
pep
could say
rally.
something.
You'd see the program, I mean, you could say, where's the program? We'd be able to give you the program for that.
Well,
So-
a career fair, I mean.
Sure.
I know at elementary
Yep.
schools, when my daughter was there, I was asked to come in on career
Yep.
fairs. I was never asked to produce a curriculum. It's just,
No.
You're just gonna
Yep.
have. group
But again,
kids
we
come by.
notify the parents, there's going to be a career fair, here's the kinds of things you're doing there, and that's definitely something that we'd be able to do.
So this is my input, I don't know. I think you guys can decide the level of documentation, but if a simple question is asked, whether it's a board member or someone from the public, what is the program? There should be a simple answer on, here it is. One pager, bam. It's not to be one pager, but it shouldn't be that hard, right?
Well, again, to your comment, Director Lynch, I think there was I mean, as you said, a level issue in being too informal. And so, I mean, from that standpoint, I definitely learned from the situation. If I send, even if I do the document as a draft document and for a more informal conversation, because of the nature of the agreement, the draft agreement that I sent, obviously it should have gone to, well, first of all, it should have gone to our entire admin team. And then secondly, from Steve's approval, gone to the higher-ups at the police department as well. And so I've definitely learned from this process and we'll no longer be having any more informal conversations.
So I want to split these three things. We'll reinvite the ICPD, separate from this program, just get back to normal, right?
Got that?
This program will re-engage. I think the level, Steve and Jeff, unless you delegate it. Delegate away if you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there's a clear expectation that the program's documented and we communicate with the parents when it's going to get active in their school.
Can I just take that one step further? Because I do agree with Director Deloach that I'd like to know, I'd like an opportunity for us to hear about the programs or
What's your
positive things that are right.
Yeah.
Understanding the positive things, because we do know that there are, now more than ever in this world that we live in, it would be nice to have positive relationships, and some of the individuals that are involved in these programs are the folks that we want to, really help forge those relationships and build trust. I think it would be nice periodically to get, reports just to find out what's going on there. It'd be great.
So there's stuff going on in all kinds of schools, all types of things going on. Are you looking for something from every school and every program?
Well, to some degree, we get, we have like our spotlights on various things going on in the district. I think it would be nice to periodically get a check-in on
So
that.
just that.
I know about like law enforcement members who are spending their own personal time to help take senior photographs and
Right.
compile yearbooks for kids at Trek and pay for it out of their own pocket. Those are important things. Those are important things that I think could go a long way towards improving some relationships. I think those are the types of things that we need to take some positives away from our interactions.
And we've got law enforcement that have kids in our schools and sometimes just want to go and have lunch with their kids as well. And sometimes lunch is just lunch.
All right, anything else on this one?
Well, I just want, just before we go, I know Henry was hurt by some of the things said, and I was just open it up if anybody wanted to say anything as far as how, it was handled, and maybe, it definitely could have been handled better. If anybody wanted to say anything, just give people an opportunity to say if they want to.
Well, I definitely take, I don't know if that's a kind of a gentle nudge or an informal nudge.
Well, I'm just saying, if you feel so.
I do feel like, again, the situations have become somewhat of a public matter, and so again, for the board standpoint, I do apologize. I try to do my job within the confines of my job description, and so, I know that your email inboxes have been filled with comments of various nature and sort. In relation to this particular situation, again, I think it goes back to your comment, Director Lynch, I could have treated the situation differently from an agreement standpoint. Obviously, I know that I have a wonderful admin team that I could have vetted this information through. It by no means means that I have any type of harbor any ill will against Mr. Harper, the individual leader of the program. This was simply me trying to get some other concerns addressed by staff members that they had questions about. And so in the future, because I understand clearly now the nature of the relationship, I won't interact in that particular way. I'll ensure that all communication is above board and happens at not only the admin level, but the police department and the admin level as well, and moving forward. Some of the comments that I think that you were privy to for email, I feel pretty strongly about, but again, I don't necessarily feel strongly about them being made public. I think that's not what a leader does, and regardless of that, regardless of the fact that I'm in a school district position, I still need to act like a leader and do things in accordance with that. And so for that, I think I could have made a different decision and made a better situation, and I apologize for that. So in the future, hopefully, again, I can learn from this opportunity and be more of a leader that I think you see, hopefully on a regular basis when I come to you with different equity concerns and positive equity things as well. And so, but I appreciate that note by Director Hemingway to give me kind of that opportunity to make that statement.
Anything else, Ms. Cochran? All right, very good, thank you. Next item on the agenda is Facilities Master Plan.
All right, so one of the things that we had a conversation with you about last time was taking a look at our buildings and better understanding, I think, where some of our opportunities lie. And we've been scrambling to get some material ready for you, and I know short notice on that, but Dwayne was able to get it uploaded this afternoon. He's given you a paper copy of it, and this is something that Dwayne has worked on with Craig and I'm going to let him walk you through the framework. He is not going to go through all 56 pages.
Let's get his check on that.
We have several pages highlighted, so he will refer to those pages in the packet as we go through it. So, Dwayne.
My cue to be brief.
That is your cue to be brief.
Well, I think a lot of this information comes as a result of the discussion we had last time when we had questions about capacity and how we determine capacity and how do we determine costs for new elementary school, okay? So I went back and resurrected some work that was done 16 years ago by myself and some architects and brought it to the modern world. It's been a while, but blew the dust off and made it better, I think. So anyway, this is what I call a building template, but it does two things. It defines the spaces and what size is optimal. It also defines how, in a particular building, how many classrooms you need to reach a certain capacity, okay? Realizing that older buildings are tougher to do, these standards in terms of size are really more directed towards new buildings, but it's still a good guideline for the renovation projects and the additions we're doing. So it also helps to develop construction budgets. Like I said, it exposes deficiencies in buildings. You'll go through and find out that there are some spaces in buildings, even the ones we've already done, that need to be done better. If we find some gems, we found a stage at Longfellow that was being used as another for another purpose that we get to repurpose back to the original use, and things like that. And it's information that our architectural teams can use, and it helps us right-size the building. So I'll go through this really briefly, point out some of the highlights of it. Feel free to stop me if I'm going too fast or if you have a question. I'll take you to page 3 to start with. And page 3 kind of defines all the things that the template accomplishes. It helps us, I think it helps us to ensure adequacy and equity across the buildings. It's an objective standard, not a subjective standard. And you use the same standard for all our buildings, and it helps you to make sure that libraries are properly sized and classrooms are properly sized. And this really will help us do that. It really takes a lot of the emotions out of it. I remember back in the day, I used to take an architect's scale and measure every room on every blueprint. Now we've got databases to help me with that. It's a lot easier. We've got all our plans online, so it's a much simpler process. But that's how you go through it, is room by room and building by building. So anyway, they're standard. It talks about the ideal number of classrooms. Again, as I said earlier, this is really not practical, if not impossible sometimes for some buildings in the older buildings, but it's still a good resource. You're going to see two things in here. You're going to see assigned spaces and unassigned. And a properly designed building has 70% of the space assigned for instructional or a purpose in the building, okay? The admin space is an assigned space. The library is, but then you get into all the different programs and their assigned spaces. A well-designed building today will be 70% assigned and 30% unassigned. And the unassigned is corridors, mechanical rooms, IT rooms, closets, things like that, that really are not assigned. And the difference between new buildings and old, sometimes the older buildings have wider corridors, have stairwells, have different things that make them less efficient than the new buildings. Okay, so 70-30 is a good range. The older buildings, you'll find the assignable space might be 55 to 60%. The template also assumes 25 students per classroom. I know the desired is less, but I'm looking at it from a purely building point of view, not instructional. How many students could you put in a room? And 25 is the standard. I've studied capacity documents from Scotland to Wyoming. And they all use 25. It's just kind of the key number. So that's what I used here. It could be, we can adjust it in the spreadsheets. It's an easy thing to do. And the other thing you'll see is that the capacities are listed as ideal, but there's a 10% add for a maximum capacity and a 10% delete for a minimal capacity. When a building becomes really less efficient if you get too few students in. Okay? So page 4 talks about elementary schools, talks about what a good science room is, or what a good classroom is in terms of square foot, what a kindergarten room is, what a preschool room, and you can just go on down the list. I don't need to read them all to you. You can read it when you get time. But it includes, community volunteer room. It talks about food service. It talks about the guidance office, the nurse's office. All that's in here. Yes, sir?
Yeah, on the special needs room with 8 students based on the number of sections, are we still going with the model of seclusion rooms in buildings, or are we entertaining the thought? I know we're going to have the discussion later on.
That particular subject is not anywhere in this document. That's an administrative use in the building. What I'm talking about are classrooms that are in the 250 to 500 square foot range that are used for special needs.
Right.
I didn't get into how you use each room.
I think that's, when we look at whether it's autistic students or whatever, I think the trajectory on that is growing instead of declining.
Right.
And looking at it, if we're looking 50 years out, we should seriously consider if we're having enough capacity.
I couldn't agree with you more, Phil. And over the 16 years I've been at it, I've seen those resource rooms grow in number. I've seen schools take full-size classrooms and cut them in half because they needed more of those spaces. And I've seen it go the other way too, and put it back as full classrooms and adding resource rooms. But the thing is, the reason why we use 8 in the room is because those students particularly need more square footage than a student sitting at a desk. That's why that number is lower. So we allowed for that, and you'll see that I added a bunch of rooms. resource rooms in these buildings. The bigger they get, the more they have. Some of them have as many as 9 or 10. We'll have as many as 9 or 10 resource rooms.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll see that.
All right, and, I think that what we found with Alexander and with our weighted resource, I know it's hard to look into the future and how things are gonna go, but as far as flexibility
Right.
and things like that going forward, it's important.
Here's another real important point in that when we look at elementary schools, I'm looking at it as a section, is the number of sections. Does it have 3 sections, which means it has 3 sections of 1 through 6, and then in every case, we added a section for kindergarten. So we might have 1 through 6 with 25 in each section. You may have 3 of each, and then the kindergarten, you'd have 4 of 20. That's how this is based. And then the preschool, again, is lowered yet, 20 in a little bit bigger room, so they have more space. So I think we've done a good job of allowing for that. The next page, page 5, is the junior high and high school templates. More junior high than high school. I frankly haven't had time to dig into the high school yet. I did do an analysis of all 3 junior highs, which I'll share with you in a second. But again, this adds some of the programming that's more specific to the junior highs, and again, you can go through it. It's not brain science, but it's just kind of a good way to look at it and say, are the classrooms big enough? Are the science labs big enough in your school? It's a good way to judge it. All right, so page 6.
I want to start
No problem.
One quick question here. On industrial technology, when you usually have 3,000 square foot there per building, what all would you say is industrial in technology?
That typically, it includes a wood shop. It includes a shop that can be used for technology, for computer-aided manufacturing, for Project Lead the Way, anything like that. You want to put it in there, you can. And it includes storage space for equipment, and it includes an office for the staff. So but you out of 3,000, you can get 2 pretty good-sized labs. That answer your question?
Example, like is North Central there, is there one of the schools that's a good example?
North Central has they have a wood shop, and they have.
Combined with that computer classroom, that's.
Right next
Small,
to it.
it's small.
They're small.
They've been cut down.
3,000?
No,
Yeah, that's not.
you'll see it here in a second.
Yeah, there's no way that's 3,000.
That's not even a
No.
thousand.
Even
That's
combined,
200.
yeah.
Southeast has a pretty good setup because they have a kind of a tech lab next to their wood shop.
I'm guessing if you include the storage at North Central, you might
Well,
be
but the storage
1,200.
is- Some of that, I think, has been repurposed to
look
like
at
a
Yeah.
concession area.
Yeah, some of it has.
Hold your thought, I'll take you right to it.
Yeah, it might be 1,000.
But,
Lot.
if Project Lead the Way is included in that 3,000 square feet, you're taking a big chunk. So
Yeah.
It's not a
Well,
lot less.
We had those lands at the
Some
high
of those
school.
are multi-purpose spaces is what we were looking at, so it might be used for the Project Lead the Way class, but it might also be part of the computer use for the construction class, when you're looking at blueprints and things like that, so we were thinking that there's some overlap.
But it's all in here, we can check it.
Yeah, I'll show you where it is.
No, it's fine.
Page 6 shows you, it starts the template sizes for the junior high as it goes from 600, and if you keep going, you'll see that it gets up to 1,000 on page 7, 8, and 9, or 9 anyway, 9, 10, 11.
Yeah.
And so those are the sizes for the different buildings. As your buildings grow in size, your cafeteria needs to be bigger, your auditorium needs to be bigger. A lot of things grow with larger capacity schools. So let's go to page 30. Here, we're halfway through already, Steve. Page 30 is an analysis of Southeast Junior High, and it compares it to an 800 template. If you look at that middle of the page, top, it says Junior High 800 model. So all those numbers going down the pages are the ideal sizes and the number of rooms for an 800 student capacity junior high. The column next to it, where it just says Southeast Junior High, that's what's actually at Southeast Junior High. Okay, those are room by room analysis. The last column to the right will show you the deficiencies or the pluses that you might have by section. So one I'll point out to you, go down to the classrooms. For an 800 student school, you need to have 16 classrooms. If you go about halfway down the page, in the middle of the page, you'll see that. And to the right, you'll see that Southeast has 12. So they have a deficiency of 4 classrooms at this particular size or template. Science labs, they have a deficiency of 3. The range of an 800 school, again, plus or minus 10%, range from 720 to 880. The current population at Southeast is 823. It's a little bit small, and Steve and I had a discussion about whether or not our junior high should have auditoriums. Basically, we are very deficient in that at the junior high level, with the exception of Northwest, that is a small theater. Okay, if you go to page 33, this is an 850 model. And the 850 model, frankly, is where I think this needs to be, where you need to be at Southeast. And it ranges from 765 to 935. It lacks 7 classrooms, it lacks 3 science rooms, and it lacks 5 special ed rooms. So if you're going to add classrooms to this school, you might want to add a science wing and bring it up to date like we did at Northwest when I first got here, and use the old science rooms for other purposes. So, I mean, you have to be smart about how you do this, but this will help you look at the deficiency in a building. Even though it's only 1,800 square feet deficient, that means that there are some spaces used in other ways in that building that probably could be used better. And this will also help us sit down now and say, okay, what's the true budget for taking Southeast and bringing it up to template? Okay, if we got to build 10,000 feet for classrooms, that's what we base our budget on. It really is a helpful tool used properly. If you go to any questions?
This first is total, or does it total up?
The total assignable?
The total at the top?
Yeah, it's at the very top there.
So you start with the totals and you break it down.
Yeah, that breaks down.
Okay.
And industrial tech is section 12, and it calls for 3,000 feet, and they have, at Southeast, they have 3,700, that's on page 34. They have 3,752 square feet there in their industrial tech area, so they have a surplus, which is a good thing. Nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
Almost there. Page 39. This is the elementary template. For 3-section, a 3A and a 3B, what's the difference? Well, a 3B may have a bonus room or 2 in it, and you have a couple extra classrooms because we all know that sometimes you have bubbles going through and you may need some additional classrooms. So that's the difference. It also affects the potential capacity. But it goes like 3A, 3B, that's 3 sections, then it goes 4. If you go on down to like page 41, it'll go to, page 42, it gets into, maybe it's 41 or 42. And 42, it's got a 5 and a 6 section as well. So what I wanted to get you to is 43. And 43 is Garner. And I did, in this packet, you'll find an analysis for Garner, for Lemming, for Longfellow. And the reason I took those 3 is that they're not done, and they're all different. They're different in age, they're different in construction.
Overview, size.
There are a lot of differences in them. So Steve and I talked about which one should we analyze, and those are the 3 we picked. I will say this to you, I'm gonna do them all in the next few weeks. I'm gonna get them all done.
We just didn't have enough time.
Yeah, it took a lot of time. So now I've got the template up to speed and the spreadsheet up to speed, it'll be a little easier to do the rest of them. Anyway, one thing I wanted to point out to you is that this is a 3B template. The range is from 696 down to 569, but the ideal is 633. The current number at Garner right now is 619, but it still has some deficiency. It lacks 2 classrooms, and the music and art are undersized. We talked about that last time. It lacks a science room and a lab. So, but the one thing I want to point out to you, if you look at Garner and you go down toward about the third paragraph across in the middle of the page where it talks about assignable, the ideal is 70. Garner comes in at 73. So what that tells you is that it was a pretty well-designed building, that the space is maximized. There's not a lot of wasted space in Garner. And that's what that tells you. So it helps you when you talk about additions. You don't have to do a whole lot back in the building because it's pretty well done.
So remember, it's a single-story building. It's got very few hallways in it. And so those are the kinds of things you'll find in that. You won't find that in some of our older buildings. If you've been in Longfellow, you know that the library is kind kind of a library and a hallway, and so and then there's 2 stairwells on each end, so when you look back at the Longfellow one, you're gonna find that it's not as efficient.
Yeah, and that's about, well, I need to say about Garner, you can study that on your own, but if you go to page 49, I was gonna point out that at Longfellow, you're gonna find before and after. I did Longfellow the way it exists today, and then I took the template, not the template, the floor plan that's been developed right now to renovate Longfellow, and plugged that in and compared the two. And it's never gonna be right, there's still deficiencies with the new design, but it does end up much better. So those are the kinds of things you can find in here, and
Sweet, it's a good reading.
I think you'll find it'll help us, the administrative team, to really put the right number on it, because we need to give you an accurate number of the dollars we need.
Part of what we wanted to do was we wanted to make sure that there was an objective measure when we were looking at it, so it can be hard to say, have you done right by a Lemmy, a Longfellow, a Garner, because they're such different schools. And so the task was, Dwayne, can you give me an objective measure that if I look at it, because remember that goal is equitable learning environments across the district, old and new, and how can we tell people that we have some belief, some confidence that they're actually equitable learning environments. So the task was, can you give me an objective standard that I can put 2 buildings that don't look anything at all like each other, a Garner and a Longfellow, next to each other, and I can tell the Longfellow parents, when our project is done, you have an equitable learning environment. So that's where this came from, because otherwise you're just looking at it. Does it feel right? Does it look right? Yeah, it might, but how do we know it's right?
At least from the space and the allocation.
Right.
that's
Yeah,
nice.
but the thing you have to realize and accept is that Longfellow's classrooms are never going to be as big as Garner or as Alexander or any new elementary school, because those are heavy masonry walls that aren't going to move. So you have to accept that. So you have to make some accommodations for that.
That's the historic part of it.
Right,
Yeah.
but at the same time, there's a
It's going to be the same way with that one as well.
yeah.
Now, with Hills, I know when we went through a preliminary facilities master plan, you were talking about doing more down there.
Right.
And I don't know if the all-purpose room had been taken off of that at one point in time, or the gymnasium or whatever, but are we, when we're talking about that, it's going to be out of staffing?
I've got a few of them I've started already doing the takeoffs on, and Hills needs, I can tell you for a fact, it needs music art, it needs a gymnasium, the
Right.
old gym can be used as multi-purpose. And those are the things that we're going to come forward to
Right.
you with, saying, this is what we need to do at Hills to make it right.
And we'll be able to drop in this template, so you'll be able to see, does it have each of those spaces that we're looking at each of the other schools? Do we see that there? And do we bring you a plan that shows those square footages within that tolerance level that says that it looks like the rest of our schools? So that is, what we hope to do is that you should very easily be able to look at any of our schools and say, up to snuff, not up to snuff. The plans you're bringing us are not good enough because there's still red numbers over here, and why is that the case? Or if you look at it, especially when we get into our older buildings, we're going to find some spaces where that building just has more of that than we would normally allocate to a building because that was there historically. Okay, that's fine. We can explain that away. We understand why that's the case. But hopefully what we can do then is when we look at a plan and we look at a footprint, it might be hard to say, does that mean you have the same amount of art space at Hills that you have at Alexander? We should be able to see that. That's what we want you to be able to do. Just really quickly be able to look at it and say, it's equitable.
So we'll get all the buildings done, so that you'll be able to just pick and choose which ones you want to look at. And then when we do that, I think, once we're done with that, then we'll, at some point, go back and look at the ones we've already done.
Right. Because we'll need to measure the ones that we've already done, but of course, that the facility master plan is a cyclical process, so we might have to look at some of those and add them back into the end of the plan if we find some deficiencies that we need to rectify in there.
At Liberty, Dwayne, what do we have for, and you may not have this at the top of your head, for our industrial?
There's a very nice wood shop. There's
Square footage.
Square footage.
Square footage.
I
Oh,
know that.
it exceeds,
The 3,000.
well, with the finish shop, and there's a classroom there, and the
Yes, sir.
tool bin, all
Is
that's
there-
pretty close. Yeah. I think it's pretty close.
But again, we'll be able to drop that into here and say, how does that stack up? And how does it stack up against City and West? So we see where the deficiencies are there and where our opportunities are.
Yep.
So in the end, you're gonna have to think about how to get to the executive summary.
Yeah, right, because once we add all the schools in here,
It's great that we have, you know, big packet by the end, but then how do you explain it to anybody is another question.
Right.
The other thing for me is when we're trying to get to, you want a decision in January, right?
yeah,
So for me, we're gonna need a simple explanation of when does air conditioning happen? Like a PowerPoint, okay, simple description, so people can understand, here's the 6 things that need to happen for air conditioning, boom, you know what I mean?
yep,
I think the next one's, we need a simple description of capacity.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about your model,
Yeah.
I'm talking about, like, I like what we did with the boundaries in that, I don't know if it's 3 years or 4 years, pick key milestones and where we had capacity and easy to read.
When we did that originally too, we used the projected enrollments that we had, and, you know, in those particular areas. So I think just as a caution to the board, when you're doing planning like that, you know, you may have to adjust the boundaries again someday because you're gonna have too many kids in that building and you've got a building right next door that has capacity. So the building is what it is unless you add on
Yeah,
to
but
it.
that gets real simple when you can see it.
Yeah.
in simple
Right.
format. I
Yeah.
don't want 10 years, you know, 15,000
Right.
pages, it's
Right.
just like, give me the one pager.
right,
So
Yeah.
what you're saying is obvious to me. Because I think those are 2 things the public expects, right? We gotta get air conditioning done, and then
Yeah,
I think people want to understand how the heck is, how does the sequence fit with capacity and should we change it for capacity? And then everything else you're doing is great, to say in the end it's equitable or.
well, and when we come to you on an annual basis, these are the kinds of things that you'll get more depth on the individual plans so that you can see from a comparison standpoint how they stack up.
Just to simplify, just as a thought, you know, what if, it's gonna sound weird, but what if the buildings that are, you know, equitable, that are right sized, that are efficient, you know, that's the 5-star goal. That's the 5-star designation. But then you could, I mean, just to break it down easy, you could have the most lacking facilities. I mean, you could see where they've got opportunity to be improved. And I mean, because again, if all you know is the school that your kids go to, it's kind of hard to, I mean, I don't know, maybe it becomes a scorecard and you don't want that, but
We're trying to do 5 slides.
there you go.
Yeah.
Nice slide, whatever it takes.
I know where Chris is coming from.
5
so
slides, I like it.
I got a limited palette to work
I
with.
like it.
the other thing that's gonna help us too though, Chris, is, for example, you asked me about the $20 million budget for the new 600-student school.
Yeah, what's
Okay?
up with that?
Well, based on this, I can tell you it's closer to 18 million, okay, even with inflation. Because I myself thought, yeah, it's a little rich. Does it really need to be 20?
But it's based on scope and not inflation.
I took the scope and then I added the proper inflation factor.
Yeah, sure. I got it.
But we took this scope, the objective scope,
Yeah, yeah.
and then add the project inflation to it.
I'm just, Delta versus 14 million, X% of scope and
Right.
X% of
Yeah.
inflation, so can you simply explain that?
Right.
All right, anything else on this topic for tonight?
You just went into engineering speak.
No.
I caught that too.
10 o'clock.
Chris,
So we're gonna,
Gagged a little bit there when I heard that.
can we just lay out maybe for us on the board, what needs to get done here, and are we going to, like, you know, I think sometimes in the public hears we're gonna talk facility master plan, they wanna know if we're gonna talk about order or things that need to be adjusted on it before the bond language goes out, but I feel like it's gotta be getting close, right? And we haven't really talked
Yeah.
that.
well,
Yeah,
that's what
we're
I'm saying, we gotta come back with,
Right.
I mean, the enrollment report's gonna be key, right? And I just said the 2 things to me, I think the sequence is okay for air conditioning, I think, always open to accelerate it. Capacity is, I think we gotta resequence based on what the capacity tells us.
There's really only a few schools left that need to be air conditioned.
Right. We're down.
No,
to-
I know, but can you simply explain that?
Yeah.
And
And highlight where it's at in the plan. Yep. Well,
Yep.
the good news on that point, Paul, is we've got some one-pagers that we already have put together that show a timing sequence. Remember those ones we had that are cascaded? These folks will have seen them, you wouldn't have seen them before. But I can definitely walk you through those too, because you'll see something that looks like that when we come back then in January.
Because we come back to something that doesn't meet air conditioning and the capacity that doesn't make any sense, that's where it's all going to drive it all.
Right.
Okay.
It's my 2 cents.
More to
All right, is there anything else in the rest, or we'll kick the rest to
We
December?
can kick the rest of this over.
All right, everybody go with that? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Josh has got the second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Yo.
Any opposed? All right, adjourned.
Have a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.